so this feels like such a full circle, and I don't know what else to say without crying. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen Hansen, author, fellow students. Let me see, we're going to do some Q&A. You're going to do it?
Maybe you want to
I think if they raise their hand.
Karen, in the time period you looked at, did you, high schools have cultures, and did you find a consistency of culture from the period that you looked at to the period that ended? Or did you find that there was changes in that culture as you looked at how the culture of that high school went over that period of time?
Well, that's a really interesting question, and since I didn't study the end as carefully and interview students really after 1977, I can't speak to it in the same way, but I do see that the issue of attachment to the school and belief in Sunnyvale school spirit, evident in the mid-60s and evident in 1981 before it closed. And so that's quite remarkable because the school underwent lots of changes, demographic changes. I assume that you've seen the slide passing by. It was actually you, Jim, who told me, the number of languages that were spoken at the school when you were teaching there in 1970. Tagalog, Spanish, Mandarin, Cantonese, Portuguese, Russian. I mean, so many languages, but by the end of the 70s, it was also Vietnamese and Cambodian and the refugees who were coming, and so there were even more languages, and yet there was a sense of, we're in it together, and some of the staff was still the same, and there are some people like Sharon Prefontaine who was there till the bitter end. Buzz Steiger was as well, and that makes a difference in recreating that culture. But one of the quotes that I want to read was from Terry Dykman, and I think this speaks to it. Terry Dykman was a counselor who worked in the late 60s through the mid-70s at Sunnyvale High, and he was beloved. I'm sorry to say he died last year, so he is not able to be here now. But it gives you a sense of the feeling, I think, and the people I've talked to who went to the bitter end would agree. So he said, there were probably a dozen real difference makers at Sunnyvale that created an environment and a culture that was really unique. There was something almost magical in being part of that staff. We knew that we were on a mission of some sort. You've got each other's back and you're willing to experiment and do some things. And he likened their work to a joint venture. He said, if it's an art project, we had great clay. The kids were all in.
Oh, that's a good one.
Hi, I'm Deanna Gonzalez, class of 1980, so right before the closure. I'm somewhat disappointed that, not against you or anything, but disappointed you weren't able to interview anyone past 1976, because I believe the makeup of the, as you mentioned, there was demographic changes. There were, migration to Northern California, especially in San Jose, Santa Clara County, that changed the makeup of our classes, and the number of percentages of folks that you have listed there as of 1970 certainly changed by the time that I was in that class. I have three older brothers, I had three older brothers. I'm happy to say that one of them some of you may know, Ron Gonzalez, former mayor, and very proud of him and all my family. All of us, except for one, the very last child and more sibling, was not able to graduate from Sunnyvale. I wonder if any of the people that you interviewed felt different about how the experience. Did they have a sibling like myself? I mean, if you had interviewed me, I would have said, interview my sister, because to this day, when you bring it up, she does not own Fremont High School as hers. Neither her boyfriend or husband to this day. They don't, they're like, no, we didn't go. That was the, we had to graduate from Fremont, is how they put it. But getting back to how people felt about Sunnyvale, and the time that, during that time of change, I think that the things that you mentioned about fighting, or the things that people were writing in the newspapers, were definitely because of the demographics. But it's also about and I don't want to bring a negative point. I also think that it may have been because of the makeup of the school, that the perceptions of the folks not at that school were because of the people going to the school. And so I feel sad about that when I think of how we felt in my class, many of my classmates felt. It's like, well, we get this bad rap, but we're not bad people.
Yep.
And it's because of who we are and the color of our skins. And I was on the softball team, and I remember going cross town, and it was like, oh, here they come. And we would win those games because, here we come. We're Jets. So I just want to thank you for the book, but it would be great to know if you have like a book number 2. Because I would love to be interviewed, because I have a story and I don't want to take up more time.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you. Your story resonates very much from what I've heard from virtually everyone. And I can tell you two things. One is Adrian Stanga first came to Sunnyvale High, and I think it was 1957 or 58, and he was brought into the school because there were a large number of Latino boys who were getting suspended. And the district was trying to figure out what's going on. What are these Latino boys doing, and how can we get a handle on it, or what's going wrong? And so that was in the 50s, and it was a working class school. It was, people's parents worked at HP on the assembly line. They worked at the canneries, at Libby's and Calcan, and so it was a working class population, and it was racially mixed from the beginning, and that was part of the stigma, and it was also part of the pride that you're describing. I don't have volume 2 planned. I am writing a memoir also that is about my time at Sunnyvale High, because this book is really about all of us, and it's about the interviews. But I want to invite you to go ahead and start doing oral histories with people, because there's a lot more to be done. And I think it would be a really valuable community project, whether you want to write it into a book or not. I think documenting that part of the history of the valley is really, really important.
Professor Hansen, thank you very much for coming to Sunnyvale. My name is Richard Mellinger. I am the city council member representing the district where Sunnyvale High School used to be. And one of the things that I have seen both before and during my time in public office is the ripple effects that its closure has had on our community. And it has frankly left it's left a wound in our community. And I wanted to ask if during your research and in your book you've gotten into the closure of Sunnyvale High School, why it was closed, and the effects of that closure on the community. Thank you.
That's a really important question, and it's not one I investigated deeply. What I have are accounts from teachers and students talking about what they saw as a very unfair process. But what I can tell you is that I don't know if Andy is in the room. There's Andy. Andy just wrote a book about Fremont High School, 100 years. It's a wonderful book. I encourage everybody to buy it. Andy, you use newspapers from San Jose, Palo Alto, Sunnyvale to look at the process of what happened when Sunnyvale closed. I only met Andy on email about 3 months ago, and we discovered that we had these complementary projects. But I wish I had known you've been so generous about sharing your files and everything, but my book was already in press. But would you like to say anything about that?
I spoke for an hour about 2 weeks ago. I can talk to the gentleman later on.
Okay. It was seen as incredibly unjust, and the district debated, when there was a decline in state funding because of Prop 13, and when there was a decline in the baby boom, so the demographic of school-age children was shrinking. A school had to change in the district. This was the logic. The two candidate schools were Homestead or Sunnyvale. And Homestead, where Steve Jobs graduated, or Sunnyvale High School that sent very few people to college straight away and had lower test scores and all those kinds of things that people measure schools by, which is not to say that they're irrelevant, but just to say they're only a small part of the story. Because Sunnyvale was really good at what it did, which is developing citizens for life, for their lives and for the community. But Andy kind of goes into it in great depth. So I appreciate what you did.
We had Robert Honda.
100 years of Fremont High School, huh? I'll bet it's a good book, but don't plan on retiring on the residuals from here.
Professor, Dennis Marr, class of '64. Did you write this as an academic book, or did you get any pushback from your dean saying you're spending 11 years writing about your high school? And I also just want to mention about when we were there in 1964, we had 400 in our class, and there were only 4 of us who were Asian. And so I always tell people, we had so few Asians, we didn't have enough for a minority group.
That's very funny.
But like I said, though, the Asians considered themselves, along with the blacks and Latinos, as minorities. And that was probably one of the reasons why.
Mm-hmm. So the question is an important one. You obviously understand academic structures that diminish certain kinds of projects. My last book was similarly so inspired. I always heard from my grandmother that she had migrated from Norway and then grew up on an Indian reservation in North Dakota. And my cousins and I would always go, how did that happen? That's so bizarre. So after I got tenure, which is the key point, they can't fire you, I started looking into that and found out actually there were all these Norwegian women who owned land on this Indian reservation, and there were lots of Dakota women who also owned land. And so I spent 15 years on that project, to doing oral history, studying land ownership records and everything. And in the beginning, I think my chair and my deans were like, but they would still give me a small grant so I could fly to North Dakota and do some more research. And then by the time I finished, and I feel similarly about the Sunnyvale book, but by the time I finished that book, I said to myself, this case study of this one Indian reservation in the Scandinavian community is actually the story of American history. This is one very particular place, but it's kind of what's happening all around. And so I took on this project because I was so profoundly affected by my experience in high school. And I set out to find out if other people felt the same. And so people were skeptical, and it was a new area of inquiry for me, except for the fact that I do oral histories, and I love doing oral histories, and I know the value of them. And so I didn't expect it to be a big project, but it kept growing. And even though I stopped when I did, it did take 11 years. And I would say that it wasn't intended to be a strictly academic book, but I would say it is a sociological analysis that uses people's stories to try to understand what was going on and what made this school special. But it's only about this school. It's not comparative. There are no other schools. So it's a case study, and people have to take it on its own terms. But now Andy's got a book about Fremont. There's another book out about Cupertino. And that says to me, what is it that's happening right now that all these people are, certainly at least the three of us are writing books about high schools in this district. Something happened here that was really special and different. There was experimentation, there was investment in public education, there was a multicultural community, and we're trying to learn from it. And so I think you take these books and you put them in conversation with each other, and maybe that can help educators out there today. That is certainly my hope. Here's an example of what these amazing educators did. They experimented, and sometimes things went terribly, but they didn't get fired, and they were able to make mistakes and then move on. And maybe there's an idea there that's a spark that can inspire people to try something and kind of go back to that sense of what do we share in common as opposed to how different we are.
Talking about Andy's book, it reminded me that when we were at a reunion game one time, and King's Academy was saying, well, we're trying to line up a game against Fremont, and so we're hoping that the Sunnyvale High people will come out for that. And I remember talking to them and saying, hey, look, Sunnyvale High's closed. A lot of the kids who would be going to Sunnyvale High are going to Fremont High School. So if you're going to root for a team, you don't necessarily root against Fremont because you're rooting against the kids that would have been going to Sunnyvale. So I just thought that was a very interesting thing to remember about Fremont High School, is that they took on a lot of the community. Again, as pointed out, they had to really jerry-rig the district, and it made it very inconvenient for a lot of people, and a lot of people did not want to graduate from there. But in terms of the makeup of the school, Fremont was a lot more like Sunnyvale than any of the other schools were at that time.
I'm a little nervous, but I just wanted to say my name's Vince Boz. I graduated in '79, and I eventually I started coaching over at Fremont High School, to Robert's point. And when I was coaching, I coached over 20 years over there. And while I was coaching, there must have been like 4 or 5 parents that remembered my brother who died in Vietnam. And they were all from Sunnyvale, and they were all the parents of these kids. And so it was really kind of special, knowing this is a big family, and it goes a long way. And it always touched my heart. Doug Boyd was my AD. He was the one that brought me over there. I saw Carolyn there, and just a whole bunch of old teachers that went over there. And I felt right at home, so just wanted to say that. Yeah.
The Boston family. We're a great family for Sunnyvale High.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to stand up. I'm Jackie Gooch. I graduated with the class of 1974. We were known as the Great Eight. There was 8 siblings that went through Sunnyvale High School. all 8 left with a diploma in their hand. All 8. Out of 8 of us, there's just 3 of us that's still living, but there's 5 jets flying high looking down on us. And there's 3 down here still floating on. And I just want to say, I know a lot of you know me. This is who I am now. I have never been so proud of where I come from, the school I come from. We've got doctors, we've got nurses, we've got realtors, we've got authors, we've got news commentators, we've got educators. We might have been a little bit slow, but you know what? At the end of the day, we number 1, we Jets.
Hi, Susie Bray, class of 1972. I'm going to answer your question. You said you're trying to find a word that describes family. This is my family from high school, and it's been 52 years since I graduated. I have girls that I play cards with once a month that I graduated with. I have cheerleader friends that I still see from 52 years ago. There's a reason for that. We were a strong community. We had Jet pride. You said pride, and family, I think are what we signify at Sunnyvale High School.
I want to say thank you to everyone, and especially to Robert and Karen. This has been a fascinating evening, and I'm not going to start any local wars, but you sure outnumbered Fremont High School. We don't own any more chairs than what we have here. We even got the bar stools out of the kitchen. Wonderful, wonderful showing too. A couple of things. The gift shop downstairs is open, so if anybody wants to look through any Sunnyvale memorabilia there, please do. There's also extra yearbooks from various years that we keep a full set in our library, but we have some extras of some years, and they're selling them for $5 a piece down there. So please do help yourself. And we just happen to have 2 extra ones for your year. So in case you have more than 1 child or more than 1 person in your life that you know wants to inherit your book, it comes complete with flags marking your photographs on here.
Can you do that with Karen's book for my...
So you have your extra annual.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then Karen also has her books for sale here. So she will be going to selling and available for signatures and autographing any.
Could I put a footnote to that?
Yes.
Okay, yes, I just wanted to let people know that we were only able to get a certain number of books here in time because it actually hasn't been officially published. So if you're in line and you want a book and we run out, we have flyers so that you can pre-order at a discount, not quite at the author's discount, but still at the discount. And if you want me to sign it, which I would love to do, you can just send me an email and I'll send you a book plate with a signature and an inscription to you. So I have a way of doing that, and so I just wanted to put that out there for the future. Thank you all for company.
Okay, before you go, stop, don't go. We're going to take one big group picture here. All right? People in the back. Seem to be like this. I can still hear
Mr. Paulson, our advisory